Today on CityCast Philly, Governor Josh Shapiro is a huge sports fan. He recently sat courtside at a Sixers game and was cheering for the Eagles at the Super Bowl. But who paid for those tickets? CityCast Pittsburgh lead producer Megan Harris chats with a reporter about the rules around gifts and campaign contributions to elected officials. It's Wednesday, March 15th. I'm Trinae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about.
I'm with Stephen Caruso. He's the Capitol reporter for Spotlight PA. Stephen, thanks so much for making time.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just get this out of the way. Shapiro is a Philly stan, I guess. I think that makes sense. He grew up in Montgomery County. What do you think? Should Pittsburgh be jealous?
I think that there is a lovely tradition of this state, both sides of it hating each other's sports teams. So I will leave that to the good people of Pittsburgh, though for what it's worth. I went to school in Pittsburgh. So if forced to choose, I'm usually going to go with the western side of the state.
What about Shapiro? He's got a little bit of a history, at least for the Sixers.
Yes. Josh Shapiro as Attorney General, if you look at his forms that he has to file, his statements of financial interest, he's actually been to a couple of Sixers games in the past. Also, he did go to one Penguins game, if I'm remembering correctly. So he spent some love to Western Pennsylvania. And, I think also, I was at his inauguration. The Sixers band played there. They have a drum line. And there was a giant dance floor that was a basketball court. So yes, Josh Shapiro certainly really likes his basketball.
It's a good time of year for him then. The tickets to this game that you reported about, how did he get those?
So the game that I reported on, I mentioned these statements of financial interest that all elected officials have to file. It wasn't on this. It was I was sent a video that showed Shapiro clearly sitting courtside with someone who multiple sources described as, and no one told me wasn't, Darren Check, a top donor for Shapiro. He's a lawyer from outside of Philly as well. And a long-time donor, I should say, has donated to Shapiro ever since his first run for state office. So the way the campaign phrased it when I approached him about it was that this was a campaign contribution, that the tickets were sort of part of his run for governor, but the tickets were for a January game this January, so well after the election. And the way they framed it was he was doing campaigning, he was meeting with voters, he was meeting with a campaign donor. So this is just a campaign contribution, and that's the way we're going to report it, and that's how it'll show up.
Obviously, you're not on his Ticketmaster, but do you have an estimate as to how much a courtside seat at the Sixers costs?
Yeah, roughly $3,000 each. That's just if you take the season tickets and divide it by games. But
smart.
secondary market could be even more.
Interesting. So as you say, his team called this a political meeting, not a campaign contribution. Those are the rules around them are so murky. There's gifts and there's in-kind contributions. So can you walk us through those, how they work? If folks aren't giving money to a candidate, what can they give?
Yeah, so a lot of this is murky because our laws are kind of murky. But the best way to describe it is that campaigns can get lots of things from people. The one we think of is just a big check that has some comically large number on it. But, you also can just give a campaign, say you rent them office space, or you don't even rent them. If you rent them at a discount, or you just say, you don't have to pay me rent, this office is yours for the next 3 months to run your campaign out of, that's a contribution. If you print a T-shirt that says vote Shapiro, and then to say, oh, you can have these for free, that's a campaign contribution. If you provide catering to the Shapiro campaign for an event, and just say, oh, it's on us because we like you, that's a campaign contribution. So there's a lot of ways to sort of also provide things to campaigns. And it's pretty common. Shapiro received a good number of these. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but, it's something you see in particular for fundraising expenses.
And campaign contributions, like monetary ones or in kind, like food or ads or office supplies, those all have to be listed in a campaign finance report, right? And those come out, throughout the year.
Yes, correct. So, the changes is how often they come out. Like when Shapiro was actively running a campaign last year, he had to put out about 7 of them, all told, before and after elections. And now, though, that he's going to be entering a year where he's not running, his most recent campaign report is going to come out at the end of 2023. And then that's opposed to gifts. So like a gift is basically just described as something that's not a campaign contribution under state law. It doesn't matter who gives it to you, but that's like the one thing that's like crystal clear in our state law is that if something is a campaign contribution, it is not a gift. Otherwise, you look at these statements of financial interest, which are filed by all elected officials. So I'm not talking about Josh Shapiro right here, but you'll see people who get the sports tickets are a big one, trips to the Bahamas, membership to exclusive clubs, and those gifts. Oftentimes they're from lobbyists, but they're not exclusively. Those are only reported once a year. And actually there's about a whole year delay. Like the report for 2023 won't be filed until 2024.
Golly. So I want a trip to the Bahamas.
Don't we all?
So these basketball tickets normally probably would have been reported as gifts, but in this case, they were listed as an in-kind contribution. What is Shapiro or his administration saying about all this?
I think, they're just saying, he was at a political meeting. That's what it is. I have talked to some people who were scratching their head at that because, look, the campaign has been run. Shapiro won. He doesn't have to actively campaign. I mean, you can make an argument that like campaigning never stops. Like, I think Josh Shapiro is a consummate campaigner. He understands like what it takes to win a statewide race. Like he was a prodigious fundraiser. He raised a record-setting amount of money. Like, that's not going to stop just because his next election is 3 years away. But I think for other political operatives in both parties, they looked at this. They're just like, I mean, this is a gift. But it just gets at how murky that because our state law doesn't really have a lot of mechanisms to like enforce this. It's a complaint driven process for both our ethics commission, which would be the ones that would like slap a hand and say, no, this was a gift, or the Department of State who collect the campaign finance. They only enforce things if someone files a complaint. And as far as I know, no one has yet over these tickets.
Is there any like broad entity that is looking at these to, maybe like occasionally take a review of major elected officials and be like, you know what, maybe we should file a complaint? Or is it all just self-policed?
It's mostly self-policed, and that kind of, an opponent could file a complaint, or someone who wants to ding Shapiro. Like we've seen this before during the 2022 Republican primary. One of the Republican candidates filed a complaint against Doug Mastriano, the eventual GOP candidate, for some discrepancies that had been on his campaign finance reports, like because he filed a revision that led to a bunch of money appearing, and I think that's something that everyone would be like scratching their head at, but the local DA was just like, I don't know if there's grounds here for me to do anything because our laws, as one GOP operative told me, are the Wild West. Like there's just sort of this general acceptance that this is the way we run campaigns under the current law, and everyone's kind of cool with it.
Has this come up before with, previous governors in the recent history, or, like the way that they deal with registered lobbyists, for example, or if someone has a contract with the state?
Yeah. So, kind of like piggybacking, we did the story on the Sixers tickets, and you also mentioned Shapiro went to the Super Bowl. His tickets for the Super Bowl were paid for by this group known as Team PA, who are a nonprofit. I won't bore your listeners with all the details, but like, I bring them up because Team PA has paid for travel for previous governors. In particular, Tom Corbett was dinged on his trips abroad. Tom Wolf, Shapiro's predecessor, instituted a gift ban, according to like people who are close to him, mostly because Tom Corbett, there were a couple stories that came out about him going to Europe, spending a yachting weekend with a big natural gas industry
I forgot
executive.
About that.
Yeah, and also like going to sporting events. I think he was at like the NHL Winter Classic in Pittsburgh. So I think Wolf's really strict gift ban, which basically said the outsiders can pay for nothing. You must reimburse everything. Like even a bottle of water at an event, if it was a 90-degree day. That was the story everybody loved to use. That would have to be reimbursed, like out of pocket. You just hand the person $2 or maybe $3 with inflation now. And so we have seen this, and I think even going back further, like I feel like there's this line that Pennsylvania has among the most corrupt governments. People like to say that in our state politics. So in some ways, like I'm not saying this to give the governor a pass, but I am saying like there's this long tradition, and also I should say the legislature, there's no gift ban on them. They can take whatever they want.
Well, and looking ahead a little bit, one half of our state is celebrating their March Madness bids. It's been a long, long time since our friends in Philly won't be represented, but the Sixers are third in the East and on pace for a playoff spot. We know Shapiro loves to ball. What are the odds that this is going to come up again in the coming weeks?
I will wait till I get a tip. Otherwise, I don't know. Though I will just note, I too would love to be able to see either the Sixers or Pitt play in a game, but that is not a request for anyone to send me free tickets.
Fair enough. Stephen Caruso is the Capitol reporter for Spotlight PA. Stephen, thank you so much for your great reporting.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have a link to Stephen's full story in our show notes. And here's what else Philly's talking about. A man drove a minivan into the front doors of the Philly police headquarters early Tuesday morning. According to 6ABC, that car didn't reach the building lobby. The man yelled, "They're killing me, they're killing me," and officers dragged him out of the minivan. Police took him in for questioning and then to the hospital. No word yet if the crash was intentional or if charges will be filed. And according to a recent Lenfest survey, 65% of Philadelphians think the city is, quote, on the wrong track, citing issues with crime, education, and the local economy. WHYY reports that the research focused on the most important issues on voters' mind ahead of the mayoral primaries later this spring. It's time for the tip of the day, where we share a life hack for living in Philly. So I recently came across an IG post of a driver discovering the Spring Garden Street tunnel. And I thought, like, everyone kind of knows that you can travel from North Philly to West Philly in like 2 minutes. From my understanding and based off street signs, this tunnel doesn't have a name. Do you know what the tunnel is called? Let me know. And if you have a tip of the day, we'd love to hear from you too. Call or text us at 215-259-8170. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter too. It's called Hey Philly. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.
Like Wolf, he took over the office from someone who there was a heir of
Kathleen Kane, who was later convicted of perjury and obstruction of justice.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
that one was hard to forget.